I'll press record now, actually, just so I won't forget.
Okay.
But this session is something, Angela, you saw in London's Calling. I have a few things to add to it, and it is being morphed into something else at the minute too. So I'd be kind of a little bit jumping here and there, but hopefully you guys will follow along. Okay. Are most people developers or administrators, or what do we kind of have for your normal
I,
audience?
I haven't looked. I'll look at the meetup. Typically, we should be more developers
Okay,
for this one. Check really quick.
very good. There's people joining, so I'll wait a few more minutes and then we'll get cracking. I mean, I don't mind how long we go here. I can go until the end of. I mean, you're probably doing this over lunch, so I can finish this at 2 o'clock your time, or I can go a bit further. It's up to you, Angela. Whatever you want to do.
Let's aim for 2, and if people have questions and can stay, let's go ahead and do that.
Cool. All right, that's great.
Sounds great.
And then I've got a few things to go over. If there's a way I could show my screen first.
Wish you can. So change it to you, Angela. Okay.
Okay. All right, and how are we doing? Should we go ahead and get started, or are people still trickling in? I know it's a little bit of a chaotic beginning.
Well, there's a couple of minutes of intros, so they're not interested in that anyway.
What? This is the most important part. Okay, well, I'll go ahead and just go through a couple of things that we've got going on and just to update people. I think we've got some new members that joined, so I just wanted to give a quick intro of your dev group leaders. I am Angela, and I've been co-leading the group since it started, I think around 8 years ago, and Melissa joined us last year. I work as generally a project manager, been an MVP for a couple of years, got some new certifications I need to start working on. And then I have the joy of working with Melissa on Rad Women, which is our initiative for coding, teaching women to code.
Yeah, and I'm Melissa Persick, and co-lead this group, steering committee for Rad Women, and I'll just keep it that brief because we're off to a late start.
Yeah, just quick upcoming events. We'll get our developer group piece posted. It's going to be in late May, most likely on the east side of the river. The Portland user group is shifting. They're going to be 1 week late because they're, I believe, bringing in a speaker to talk about a new approach to rolling out Lightning and just a new approach to Lightning. I saw his presentation in Uruguay, and if that works, it's going to be, I think, pretty good. I don't think that the not-for-profit group has anything going on, and then we'll be working on resumes and salary negotiation in May for the Women in Tech group. Melissa, this is you.
Yes. So as most of you have seen, we have a survey that went out about a little over a month ago. We've gotten a great response to that. So thank you so much to everyone who's already filled it out. If you haven't had a chance, please do so. It's giving us really good information and helping us plan out the upcoming year of meetups to best meet everybody's needs.
And I'll go ahead and put this in the comments as well for our meetup. Yay, the Forcelandia call for speakers is open. That will be August 2nd and 3rd this year. If you're interested in speaking, or you know of somebody that might be interested in speaking, we've got about a week left until we close it and start putting together that. So if you visit us at forcelandia.com, you can click on the link there. And I have to update the slide. There are several events popping up in India. So if you have a desire to combine traveling and Salesforce, there are a lot of opportunities around the world now through the end of the year and into the next to go ahead and present and stretch your speaking skills. And I think that's the fastest we've ever done introductions. So I'll turn it over to Barry. I had the immense pleasure of seeing Barry present in London at the beginning of the year, and I thought his topic was fascinating and valuable for the Portland group. And he was gracious enough to say, yes, I'd love to promote or present remotely and stay up nice and late. Well, not too late on your side.
No, it's not too late. Fine.
Yeah, not too late. But he also said he'd get up in the middle of the night if we wanted to. So he's
absolutely. I'm a developer. I'm mad. That's the way
we just have to get you over to this side of the pond. But I thought his presentation was valuable, and I'll turn it over to you, Barry, to just maybe give a little bit more of an intro and then launch into things.
Yeah, sure. So I'll transfer ownership of the screen to me. I'm going to flick between slides. So if I flick here, you guys can still see a browser now. Can you see that? I'm just moving here. I just want to make sure GoToMeeting is working as I would expect it to.
Yep, looks good to me.
Okay, good. All right. So this session, This session is about Lightning components, but it isn't really a how to make one. It's more of a thinking piece that kind of is 3 or 4 talks rolled into one, as it turned out. And as Angela said, I met her at London's Calling back in February, and this is where I presented it. If you want to grab me, I'm better to get on Twitter at Devin the Cloud. I have a blog, devinthecloud.wordpress.com. This slide deck is on that blog, so if you go to that blog, you'll get it right now. And I work for a company called Blue Wave Technology. So just a brief intro of me and Blue Wave, so you know who I am, who I work for. So the company is based in the UK, and as you can probably guess, Ireland. With 30 employees, 20 of them are Salesforce certified professionals, and about 11 of us teach for Salesforce University. I do that myself. We do lots of things, Pardot, DocuSign, a few other things with partners as well. But our long-standing thing is we're IBM partners too. So the whole IBM Salesforce unit, if you like, link has been greatly excited, or our company. I have lots of different credentials. I've been developing on Salesforce since 2011, but I've been developing web pages for 21 years now, which is a long time. I organize a developer group based in Dublin. We've been going for 4 years, so not quite as long as you guys have been going, but we're kind of proud of that. We've got a good crew of guys who go to that, and good presenters too. So this talk was born a year, actually even further than that ago than now. I was actually born in Dreamforce 15. I was lucky enough to present at Dreamforce 15, and I presented a Visualforce single-page application. It's a pretty rich application. Does project timesheets, that's what it does, and it's lots of CRUD operations. But the one thing about this particular single-page application is that it has no Apex whatsoever. Everything is using remote objects. An Angular JS version 1, and it was bootstrapped, and it was all good back a year and a half ago. And that code, by the way, is on my blog. So if you go to my blog and look for that, all the code for that you can get for free. It's on my GitHub repo. But the very first London's Calling was actually a year ago, and Simon Goodyear, who Angela knows well, we were both learning to teach the new Lightning Components course, Dev 601, for Salesforce University. It had never been taught. In fact, the first time it was taught was in March of last year. So I was presenting in London's Calling before that. And he dared me really to recreate this using Lightning to see what it was like and kind of report to everyone in the session what that's like. And I did. I made very rudimentary Lightning application. Lightning back then really wasn't something I would recommend to a client at that stage. This is before Spring 16. Really, summer 16 is when you really looked at Lightning to be something that customers can really take and use from a developer point of view anyway. And again, the code for all this is also in my GitHub repo. I'll give you the link to that in a second. In fact, Angela, I think I've sent you a lot of links and an email there. You can post them on the chat.
Will do.
So when I was doing this app, this was just, it wasn't a dare from Simon. It was also a way for me to get used to Lightning. Because remember, a year and a half ago was a while. And I was really spending, it takes 3 months pretty much to prepare a course, pretty much to get a 5-day course ready in your head so you can teach it with examples and things. So this was my way of getting my hands dirty before I actually taught it. So I taught it for the first time in April. I was the first person in EMEA to teach Lightning component development for Salesforce University. On the box on the left are the different areas that we teach in that class. These are the more advanced areas, actually. We do teach how to make a component, and you guys can go on the trailhead and view all about that. One of the areas that changes a lot every single release is where we can surface components. Back then, it was only Salesforce 1, believe it or not. We couldn't put components pretty much anywhere else, unless we made an app. How we create and destroy a component, how we use vBody, how we use events, how we talk about inheritance, making forms validation. These are all crucial things to know if you're going to make Lightning component applications. And these, I'm not going to go through what these are. I want to talk about something else. But this is what we learned back then. But since then, things have improved quite a lot, actually. Lightning Design System used to be something we dragged in as a static resource. Now it's in the framework, which is kind of handy. We now can add components in lots of places. Lightning Experience, record homepages. We can put them in communities now. We can lightning them out to other systems. And we now have, of course, our utility bar, which up to 2 months ago was soon. We now have it. We have our base components. And the biggest advantage, the biggest thing we've seen in Lightning component development has been base components, because we have about 42 or 3 exercises we do in the 5-day course. To do the same set of exercises now as we did back in April of last year, we write 30% less code. So Lightning-based components and a lot of less markup language we need to write to do the same thing. So the framework is improving. So we can deliver better functionality. But what I want to talk about today is coming from that. I really have only taught the course 5 or 6 times. I don't teach a lot. I'm mainly a developer. I develop for Blue Wave. I'm one of the senior developers. So we do a lot of Lightning component development. And we've been doing, I think I've counted 8 days since the 1st of June last year where I have not been developing Lightning. So we've been on big Lightning projects. And this talk was mainly about looking back on what we did and the things we learned, and maybe the things that are not taught in that course or not in Trailhead, and the things that we found. How do you make a component? Most blogs you read and Trailhead you go through, and even the Dev 601 course itself is very workshop-like. You follow step-by-step instructions and you make your app, and you learn a lot doing it. But there isn't a lot of thinking. There isn't a lot of, okay, how do I start? And most developers, when I've been teaching developers for Self University for the last 4 years with Apex and Visual Force and everything. And developers just want to know, how do I start? I'll make it complicated myself, but how do I start? And this is what I wanted to talk about, how we begin, how I begin to talk to a customer about making Lightning components. Do they need them? How am I going to make them? How are they going to know what they're going to get at the end of development? And how we make that an iterative, agile type of interaction between me and my client. And I came up with 2 steps in terms of how I would make components. The first one is really about user face design and how we design an interface. How we go from a blank screen to something that looks like what the customer is going to get, okay? And how we get customer acceptance in that. And then after we finish that, how do we break that out to be actual project with loads of components inside of it that we need to make our app work? So let's talk about the first one. And the first one was user interface design. And this is a tool, or if you like, a code set that the Salesforce UX team, so this is Salesforce's own user interface design team, created themselves and showed it to people at Dreamforce last year. It was a workshop, and you can follow if you like, you can follow the step-by-step on the workshop by using this web address here. And there's also got a GitHub account. So let's just show you this for a second to see what I'm talking about. So they have can you guys see that web page? I'm just making sure because I'm remote here. Everyone can see the website? Yeah, okay, good. All right. So this is, and I've given this link to Angela. This is a link to all of the workshops that were taking place in the dev zone at Dreamforce last year, including the mini hacks if you want to follow them. What we're looking at in this session is this prototyping with SLDS. And this is the workshop that you follow. Okay, so this workshop is based on a GitHub repo. So if you scroll down, you will see a link in the Get Started area where you'll see a GitHub repo, which is here. And you can clone down this repo, do all the npm installs on it, and then you can run it. I'll run it now in a second and you can see it going. The idea behind this is that it gives you a mock-up framework to make screens. They're not even in Salesforce itself. It's just running locally on a machine, or you probably saw a minute ago in here, you can actually deploy this to Heroku if you want to show your clients. And the idea behind this is that you can make fully fledged screens and then change them really fast. Okay, so we've been using this framework for pretty much the last 6-7 months since I saw it at Dreamforce. It's certainly paid for my Dreamforce trip. I keep telling my managing director it's paid for already. Before I used it, I used something called Balsamiq Mockups, which some of you may have used before. It's very cartoonish. It's its own thing. But I've moved completely now to using my Lightning Design System Starter Kit. And you can see this screen I'm just hovering over here. That's a full screen I created with the kit. This is not inside Salesforce. This is something I created. So I'm going to give you a demo of it now to show it to you. It's not going to be a full demo. I've actually got a fuller demo in my blog. So if you go to my blog and scroll down in my London's Calling blog, you'll see I have a full 35-minute video of me going through what I'm going through now very quickly. So you guys can do this on your own bat, and you can follow the workshop. When you do it, you'll realize how good it is. So let's go to my code. And I have a set of code here. I got the right one. Yeah, okay, good. So I've basically downloaded a repo. I just pop across here. I just downloaded this repo here, and I've expanded it. I've done npm install on the repo just to install all of the modules that it needs. And it comes then with some files that we can play with. So we can stick this src directory, whatever, into something like, I'm putting it into Visual Studio Code here. You can use whatever you want. I can see I've got all my files. And what we're interested in is what's in the views directory. So in the views directory, we've got a number of pages. Okay, so all these pages we have here. Let's have a look at them in action. So if we go to my terminal, I have one started here. I'm not sure which one it is. Let's see if it's, okay, it's this one here. So I have in this directory, this design, so I've actually done my npm install, and now I'm going to run it, and I use npm dev run, and that'll go off and run that code. Actually, npm run dev, sorry. And that's going to go off and run gulp and a few other things, and it's going to launch my page. So if you install it, and you run npm install, and you run npm run dev, you will get this screen. That means you've installed it correctly. And don't worry if you haven't noted that down. All the instructions are here. So all I did was download it, clone it down, run npm install, and then run npm run dev. When I run dev, I get my screen. So this is my welcome screen. This is their index.html. Now, to get used to this, what they get you to do in the workshop is to actually do some work with it. I'm going to start it so you guys can see what you do, but when you see it, it's very simple. So if I go across it, let's show you the page working first. So if we go, I'm going to minimize this screen here. And if we go here, this is the starter screen. So they have a couple of files in here, and one of them that's given to you already is called workshop.html. If you look at the index, you'll see it, work spell workshop.html, and you get pretty much a blank screen. Okay, the idea is that you'll start working with this screen to fill it out. What you will create at the end is you'll create this screen at the end of the demo. Again, this is all working inside of that npm directory. This is not inside Salesforce, and we can make this within minutes, basically. So let's just start it, and you'll get the idea of what's happening. So blank screen, let's pop back to Visual Studio Code, and we'll open up that workshop screen. And how it works is, as you can see, the page is made up of a huge amount of comments. So we're going to go and get some code. So here's the page header, for example. If we tap into the link here and copy out this link and simply go across to a browser and just open up the link, the idea is that you will be brought straight to some code in Lightning Design System. And you copy it and paste it in between the header and the footer. That's pretty much all you do. So in between the header and the footer, I'm going to paste it in, press save. And if I go back to my screen, my workshop screen, you can see because it's using gulp, it's already, there's the header. That didn't take very long. So you can make pretty advanced screens without really going into Salesforce at all. The idea behind this is that you could have somebody who doesn't know how to code Lightning or doesn't know how to code Apex, but maybe he's a web developer. They're doing some Salesforce administration, or they're doing some kind of Heroku development or whatever for their company. And the idea of this is that they can create the screen, they can do interaction with the customer, and they can figure out what does the customer want and make a screen, obviously in conjunction with the developer, to find out what is or isn't possible. And then you basically have your page agreed with the customer, which is kind of cool, right? Okay, so let's take this on a bit further. This is pretty much as far as the exercise goes, but let's take this on a bit further. In our code, we have a few things. We have another page here called example.html, and it's one to, if you're a developer, it's a good one to watch because there's a few little hidden gems in this toolkit. If we look at example.html, there's a lot of records in here. This is what they give you. You get this out of the box. But if we look at these records, what you'll notice, if we go to example.html, what you'll notice is, let's see, where is that link here? Do they have it? But it's probably hard-coded in here. They have. I can show you a different version of an AI working. Let's go to a different example of one that I built. That will give it to you a bit better. So I have a page that I have built. Where is it? It's here. So I've made this page. We've actually made versions of this type of page for a couple of customers. The idea is having a filter screen on the left and a box on the right, but this is running using that raw HTML. So let's show you this in action and how the code works for this. So I'm going to pop across to a different repository where I have this code. which is not that one. It's this one. And the idea, I've got a page here. This is all on one HTML page called Prices Viewer. And as you can see, it's including things. It's doing some code in here. Most of you don't worry about. The language, the framework they're using here is called Nunjux. It was created by Mozilla. So when you see it working, it's pretty straightforward. This is the boilerplate to bring in the top part of the screen. You can add your own JavaScript to it if you want to. You can add your own CSS if you really want to, although we usually use SLES. And I have a lot of things going on here. There's a header, there's a form, there's a panel. But what I really want to bring you to is we can actually iterate over records. In my screen, I'm iterating over products here belonging to Nike. There's lots of fields in here, and there's an inner table going on, and there's iterations of this. I don't really want to type all this out because that'd make for a very long HTML page and it wouldn't be very reusable. So in this, they've allowed us to bring in JSON into our mockups. So you can see I'm looping over something called products. Now products hasn't been defined anywhere really. So you can see the name of my file is prices viewer. If I pop up to the data directory in here, there is a prices viewer.json, and that's the rule. If you have a prices viewer HTML, you should make a prices viewer.json. And in the JSON file, lo and behold, I've got lots and lots of JSON. And these are the products I'm looping over. There's the products attribute in my JSON. So when I looped over it in my file, that's what I was looping over. I was looping over products. And inside each one, I was getting, for example, record.name, because record.name is in my JSON. So you can use the JSON to make very complex screens with lots of reasonably rich data inside it without copying lots and lots of HTML. The eagle-eyed people among you might have realized I'm using weird names here. I'm using status underscore C's. I'm using sizes underscore R's. I've been using this so long, I'm already thinking ahead of what my data model might be in Salesforce. Okay, so and even though that looks like I don't have to do it, there is an advantage I'm going to show you in a few minutes, okay, as to why I would do this. Everyone kind of see that code? Everyone happy enough? Understand what's going on?
Yeah, that's so awesome.
Okay, so let's move on a little bit. I'm looking at time here. So again, you can also just deploy your pages to Heroku. I am not an Heroku person at all, and I can do it, so you guys can do it too. And you can add username and passwords to it. So, for example, what we do in Blue Wave is that we would make some screens for a user. We put onto a Heroku app with a username and password for that customer, and then they can have their people look at it through Heroku, and we're not even in the room. They're actually looking at it. What can you make in here? And can you give us back really good feedback? So that's how we do UI design. But then it moves on to how we use this. So just an update on the starter kit. This isn't something that's, they are updating this. There was a small update made in Spring 17. So there is a sharing model now that different HTML files can use a share.json that you'll see in the code. So that is common data, if you like. And then any improvements you make, you can add it to it. In fact, you might have seen in one of my examples, utility bar poked its head. Let's just show you that in action. So in here, let's see if I go to my workshop done here, and you'll be able to see it. And you see I've got the utility bar at the bottom of the screen. You guys see that utility bar? All I did for that was I popped over Lightning Design System, and I copied utility master record home. Let's see if I get utility bar, which I can find. Utility bar. And I simply copied this HTML and put it at the bottom of the screen. It was as simple as that. Because it's using Lightning Design System, it knows to put it at the bottom. And all the classes are there to make sure it all works. So I just copied it in and made it work. Simple as that. So you get the idea of what you're going to create. Let's move this on a bit further again. So I have created some components in a Salesforce org. So let's pop out. This is my Salesforce org. And I have a component called Price Console Demo. Let me show you this on the screen, and then I'll show you how the code is working. So if I pop across to my Salesforce org, which is here, good. And I'm going to look at price lists. Okay, so this is an example. This is actually in Salesforce working as a tab into two components, or a component that's created with the app builder. Okay, so how did I make this really fast? Well, let's have a look at it. So this is my component. And what you'll see on this version of the component is that I have got some HTML here. This is an exact copy of the a file I showed you a few minutes ago, my prices viewer. I actually haven't changed very much at all. I've copied everything into it. I've had one or two changes. Salesforce Lightning doesn't support SVGs, so I replaced these with Lightning icons. Okay, that's fine. They're pretty straightforward. But the rest of it is all pretty much as I created. The only change I made really was how I iterated over the records I was displaying. So instead of doing this nunjux thing, what I really want to do is iterate over something. And I'm iterating over something called v.products. So I'll show you this in a second what this products is. But you can see as I'm going in through, I've got product.market C, status under. These are the JSON that I created before. So let's see how I actually populated this. Well, I didn't do very much, anything really complicated. I have v.products, as most of you know in Lightning terms, is an attribute, which is a variable. So if we go to the very top, you'll see I've put in products as a list of objects. Initially, it's blank. And I have my initializer here that's going to run some code. So in my code, I'm not doing anything fancy. All I'm doing is that's the exact same JSON. I simply copied it into a variable, and I set it to the attribute. Now I haven't gone off and gotten data, nothing like it. But I haven't really finalized yet what this is going to do. So this allows me to make a working version of a component. And in the case I have here, I've made it as a full screen. But I could add this to a particular part of a home page, or I could make it so that it looks like it's working. So if I'm going to finish this off, then I can go further and then change this so that instead of just getting JSON, I have a version here where I'm going off and doing a call out to a pretty simple class. I will show you the class because it's important for you to see something here. So the class I have here is called price retriever. It's just a very straightforward query, getting back the stuff I need from, in this case, my products and my shoe sizes object in this case. And when I come back to my page, in my Apex, what I'm doing here is I'm iterating over it, but I'm using a child component, which is what you should do, called price card object. And my price card object, which I'll just open, is actually pretty simple. It's just showing almost the exact same fields because that's how I had formed my JSON. So that's showing those records. This is very similar to the HTML I very first created, except I'm using more iterations. Let's take this on another level again. Let's recreate that object. And this time I'm going to use something else. So here is very similar code looping over my products. And as I move down, I've got my initialization. And I'm going to scroll down to the very bottom, and you can see I'm now using price card, which is another object, to show my record. Let's show you price card. Price card is different from price card object because instead of doing a query, I'm using data service. So now I'm going to use data service to get my field and to add, and you can see the exact same code is working, the same UI, the same field names. And instead of querying for it, I'm just using data service, which we'll get to use in summer 17, which will save us a lot of time. So hopefully you guys get the idea that I'm moving from a very HTML page that just does what it does to moving it into a component and then breaking out the data so that at least it looks like it's working to a final version where we are working with actual data. So let's move on and talk a bit more about, okay, that's starter system and that's how we make components. But when you make a big screen, you can see I've got everything there in like a big component. Normally you should make your components as small as possible, right? That's how React works, that's how Angular works. Isn't that not how Lightning should work? Well, components should be as small as possible, but there should be a reason to make a component in Salesforce. Once you're paid, your component works. That's fine. The only reason you'd ever make sub-components of something like I've done there is to either separate out work, to make your testing more efficient because you can test a component once and it always works, but it's reusability. That's the key reason you'll make components. That's the reason you would take a big screen like this and break it into smaller components. But everything in Salesforce development is based on cost benefit and deliverability. If there's no cost benefit to making a small component, in my opinion, you don't do it. You only componentize something if it benefits the developer to make better applications or more cost-efficient applications in the future. It takes time to make lots of components. And when you make lots of components, you have to make lots of events because they talk to each other. That takes time as well. And events tend to be the longest thing that takes you to test. So what I've done in the next few slides is giving you some examples of where we have made big screens and then broken them down for particular reasons. There's a couple of good webinars on this as well. I'll show you links to in a minute. This is the screen I pretty much showed you a minute ago. And how we would break this down is we would see the filter as being a reusable piece. So that's one reusable side, and this is another reusable side. The reason to make this also reusable is because we want to make this as a full app, and we're going to use the app builder to do it. So the top part, the top red square you see here that with product price list in it, we don't even make that at all. When you make the app builder, that comes in automatically. So we just make an app in the app builder and bring in our two components. And what we do is to make a search work, we click on search, we create a SOQL query and it's a string with everything you've selected, and we send it over to the main panel, which receives it and then does a query with Apex. It's pretty much as simple as that. But there's a lot of stuff going on here, obviously. We further break down that then into its reusable components. So we have a card-based interface here because we've simply too much information for a table row kind of data set. So we're using a card with a title and we've got lots and lots of fields. So this becomes a reusable thing that we can then copy. We've also got a reusable checkbox. So checkboxes in Lightning Design System are not 100% there yet, really. So we wanted, in this case, to when you click on the All button, make this a bit bigger because it's a bit small for you guys. When you click on the All button here, everything else gets disabled. We're going to select All, but when you click on one of these, everything becomes enabled again. So we've built this as a reusable component, and we've given it away. It's actually in my GitHub repo. I'll show it to you in a second. And we've also taught a data filter here. We've made this reusable too. So the idea of this is just to break things down so that we've got developers. I've got a developer working on the filter side, another developer working on the main panel side, and they're really working with each other through events. Good information on component design is John Bealow's webinar that he had last November. It was one that Salesforce developers advertised. You can get it, it's recorded. And also a very good resource to think about components is in React. React is very component-based. Angular is a little different in my opinion. React is very similar to how we would see Lightning component design working in many ways. The other reason to make a component is to make very complex code simple. So we have made similar tables to this where you're comparing a value in the future to a value in the past. And we're doing some fairly important calculations because these calculations are using tax and some threshold limits and discounts and all sorts of things. So this tends to get quite long. In fact, it gets very, very, very long. So what we've done here is we've made a component that will handle all the calculations. And you're just passing through one value against the other. Now these can be long, of course, but you're doing all the calculations for each of these against each other in one place. You're fixing it in one place. One thing to note though about, especially about numbers with Lightning components, is that you always need to check for not a number, nan, and the only way you can check for nan right now in Lightning is through JavaScript. So if you choose the formatted number, you will have to check to make sure it's not a nan before this gets rendered. Just a bit of a tip that we found out the hard way. This is the checkbox I mentioned before, and the code for this is available here. And just to flick across here, this is my GitHub repo, and that checkbox group, because I give this as a session for the Dublin team, many of them hadn't done complex components before. Instead of just giving you the code, I've also in the README made a tutorial as to how to do it from scratch. So you can make these and follow the tutorial, and you will end up with a reasonably nice checkbox. It looks like this. It's completely reusable, that you can select the values you want in here. And if you see at the bottom that we've got trues and falses, when you check on this, the values update. But that's a completely reusable checkbox, and it's a good way to go down through. This is about 3 levels of components deep with a lot of events in it. And if you do want a probably more advanced piece of functionality to try your hand at, that's a good one. Okay, so again, it's in my GitHub repo. It's the Lightning checkbox group. So let's just a couple more examples of what we've done in Blue Wave. This is the very first app we ever made with Lightning. This was built last June and July. We didn't have design system starter kit before we made this one. And it was a very, we'll call it a movable project. The requirements tended to morph a little bit. So we actually couldn't show them the full thing working until a week before UAT, which was a bit worrying, but we got it done. One thing to note about this is the idea behind this was to make a company who everyone can see all the leads. They wanted to see leads was specifically pertinent to them. Also to flag it that if there's info that we already have, this is before we knew anything about Einstein really. But the idea of it was, what I'm going to show you here is the conversion wizard. So when we press on convert of a lead, this company had a number of stages, including account hierarchies and making contacts and making opportunities. And they wanted everything on one screen. So we made a wizard component that goes across the stages that when you press convert at the end, it makes all the conversion happening. But what we did was, when we had this created, we created it as one unit. So we could then take this component and then add it to the lead as a tab. So you didn't have to go to our app. You could go directly to a lead and get access to the same wizard. Okay, so that's another thing to keep in mind, that you might want to reuse this in different places. Something that Angela didn't see in London's Calling is something that I'm morphing this presentation to be shorter, and I'm also presenting it at the World Tour in London. And the idea is something that was a conversation internally in Blue Wave, where I was trying to explain to my managing directors and project managers who, okay, they're getting into Lightning, but they're not really 100% with it yet. They leave it to us, the developers and administrators, to figure it out. Was how is Lightning different from, let's say, developing Visualforce? What are the differences? And the phrase I used, and it just came out, was we're building a bridge, and it kind of stuck. What I meant was that typically when my managing director usually gets someone who wants something in Salesforce, and it can't be done with the setup menu. The setup menu is Salesforce platform's key feature set. Someone can make an excellent app without writing any code at all, and it's brilliant. We only come in as developers when a setup menu doesn't work. It doesn't provide the customer what they want. Okay, so typically my managing director's answer is, let's make a Visualforce page. That's what he always says. Oh, we can't do it setup menu. Let's make a Visualforce page. And fine, that's great. But Lightning is far more flexible than Visualforce. Lightning's key aspect is view. 99% of components you'll ever make have some aspect of user interface to them. So when you talk about changing from classic to Lightning experience, the logic is irrelevant. The Apex class that triggers all still work. It's the user interface. And when we make Visualforce in the past, we always made entire screens. You'd replace the page layout of opportunity with a whole Visualforce page, and you might include Apex detail, maybe you don't. All of a sudden, you've broken the link between the project manager and the administrator and the client. The developer is now in the way. Okay, that means that any changes to make, the developer has to make them. It just means that it's an extra person that doesn't really have to be there to do everything. When I talk about building the bridge, what I mean is that the developer's role in Lightning is different now. We're now working with the administrator, hand in hand, to make something work that couldn't work before. An example of it is something we recently did for a customer. And I showed this actually to a client. So this is not what they got. This is my version of it. But the idea of it was, in an opportunity, you have line items. The problem is that for a couple of our customers, line items get batched together. They're not sold individually. They're sold as batches of things. And in Visualforce, to make that as some kind of related list of something, you typically have to make a Visualforce related list and maybe embed it into a layout, which I hate, or replacing the entire screen and adding in a fancy related list at the bottom. And the idea is that each size here in these rows, these are line items, and you've got something over it that's going to batch them together. Okay, some kind of overall record that's linked to the opportunity. In Lightning, this is much simpler because the details tab, the chatter tab, they're on the process and the approval buttons, they're all as they are. We're not changing them. But we want to make a component that replaces, in many ways, what a related list is doing. That's what we're trying to do. So we make the component itself, just that part of it. And that's what we deliver. And the rest of it is down to the administrator. So we're no longer in the way. We're now enhancing what the administrators can do. And we have to be part of that. So this is a design system starter kit screen I created. Yes, this is what we want. Then I went off and made it iteratively with the administrators. We made the background object data model, which is where you start. Then we started piecing together how the logic was going to work. So you couldn't, if you like, close an opportunity unless there was a product there, something like that. And then we had the solution, and the customers love it because as far as they're concerned, it just works. But we've changed from me replacing the entire screen in Visualforce to just doing a small part. So that's part of what I'm going to talk about London's the World Tour. The last thing, and we've 8 minutes, Angela, so I'll try to get through this as best I can. This is the bit that the developers need to listen to. The administrators may not get this. This is takes about 8 slides to explain it, so I'll just go through it rather quickly. This is a scenario we faced about 6 months ago. We needed a save all button on a Lightning component. Now, typically on a table like this, where we're adding a date field and you're trying to add would have saved that date against that record kind of thing, a save all needs to save each individual one. The problem is that each of these rows is typically a component. We don't usually make them in a big table. In Visualforce, this is actually easy. You make an apex repeat with an input text and you put it against a property and you save it. And okay, that's pretty cool. All right, that's grand, but you're still interacting with the server. The save all button in Lightning, each row is going to be a component. So this is what it looks like. So each row, that box is a component. You got another one as a component. And the idea of save all is that you want each one to save individually, but you want to refresh the screen when they're all done. You've kind of no idea how many there are going to be. You don't know if someone has not put a price in or not put a date in and save it. How do we do this? And it's kind of the more advanced example I showed London's Calling, and some of the developers got it. So the idea behind this is that we use objects and JSON to do this for us. Salesforce Lightning talks in JSON. When you send an event from one component to the other, you can send it across in JSON. So the idea is that on my object, I'm going to create, on this component, I'm going to make an object beside my save all. That object is going to be very simple, save all rows, an object, and just blank. And when I press save all, I'm going to run some JavaScript, and it's going to populate this attribute with values. Each plan's record ID I'm trying to save, and some kind of message to say, okay, I'm waiting for a response from you, and some values I'm going to get back in a few minutes. And then I press save all. When I press save all, I'm going to, with that JavaScript, call an application event. That's been listened to by each row. That application event is received, and it'll fire some JavaScript of its own. That JavaScript will be a couple of things. It'll say, is there a date there? There is. Okay, fine. I'm going to be saved. There's no date for this one. Then it doesn't get saved. This component event is then listened to on the parent that's saying, okay, I'm waiting for 10 plans. I've got a response back from one saying, save me with this date. I have a response back from the next one saying, don't save me, I have no date. And eventually I might have 8 different rows being saved and 2 being ignored, but I'm waiting for the 10th one. I'm waiting for the 10th response back. And when I get back all 10 responses, I save them all with Apex in this component. So the save all is doing the saving. I'm not pressing save and waiting for each one to save because we've no idea how long that will take. So you get the idea. I'm using JavaScript in here to call an application event. It's full of JSON, and that JSON has been populated straight back, waiting. And that the attribute that's been filled is the attribute I showed you at the start. The idea is I'm filling up that attribute. I can pop back to show you what the attribute was. Hang on. Pop it ahead of time. That attribute there, that's save all rows. That's been populated back with the date you're saving and waiting for it to come back. How many am I getting back? And when I get 10 back, then I do my save. So that's great, but there's a better way to do this. And the reason, what I really hate with Lightning is that I have to write Apex. Apex is great, fantastic language, but the problem is that it takes time to write. You got to test it. Field level security is not obeyed in Lightning components, which is a problem. Error handling, I've got to handle all error handling in the JavaScript. Pagination has to be controlled. It's just repetitive code we don't have to write all the time. So we're going to use data service, and data service will help us with this kind of scenario. So if we go down through, data service is brilliant because data service has got it gets the record, but it also gives us events. So when the record gets updated, do something. If I get an error when I save it, do something. So we have lots of stuff back from Lightning Data Service that eliminates huge amount of JavaScript for us. And here is where we're handling the save event. We can populate a toast when it's successfully saved. So data service is available in summer 17. And this is how data service can help us, because in our save all button, instead of the JavaScript pointing back with a component event, save this one, the JavaScript and each component will save itself with the record with data service. And then we tell the main component that I'm done now, and it calls no Apex whatsoever. So the data service will eliminate, in this very complicated scenario, we won't have to write any Apex at all to do the exact same thing. So this is a summary, and that's gone through the last bit very fast. My session London's calling is recorded. I've also sent that as a link to Angela. Just starter kit, I find it brilliant. It's well worth your time to invest a few hours to figure out how it would work for you. The workshop is very readable. Design best practices for Lightning components. There isn't much talk about it yet. It's getting there. There's some excellent bloggers out there. Christoph Konrads, Rene, I never remember his surname. There's some guys out there doing great stuff. And all of this stuff, Lightning is changeable, but data servers is something that's really going to help us down the line. And Angela, that's nearly 2 o'clock your time.
Excellent.
Any questions? Any questions out there?
This is a comment, and this is Melissa speaking. This was super helpful for me. I've just started diving into component development, and it's been a big, just a thought pattern and mindset shift. And so this kind of lays out for me a process of thinking about how to design and implement these things fairly quickly. So this is really cool. I haven't fully taken it all in, but I really appreciate it.
Excellent, very good. In fact, when I gave this a London's Calling, I actually had people put their hands up who had never heard of the design system starter kit, and there were 3 evangelists in the room, and they hadn't heard of it. So there you go.
All right. Does anybody else have any questions? I think we've got a quiet group today. But as you know, Barry's Twitter information is in our meetup group. So if you have any questions, you can tweet him. If you don't mind, I can put your email in as well in case people want to follow up with you afterwards.
Please do.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and post that in links.
And I have this recorded. So Angela, I'll save the recording and I'll get it to you through Dropbox or something.
Excellent. Yeah, fork it on over and we'll put it out for people. Thank you so much. I think this was, it just gets better each time, and hopefully we can have you back or invite you out to Portland.
Absolutely. Now we're talking. Absolutely. Yeah. I will be at Dreamforce this year, so I'll be around. Absolutely.
It's just a short flight up. We'll talk.
Exactly. Very good. Very good, Angela. All right, guys.
All right. Thank you so much.
No problem. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay.
Thanks everyone for dialing in.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.